Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a Triad production. I'm your host, Dr. Graham Taylor. My guest on the show today is Dr. Henry Venter. Henry is a licensed clinical psychologist and professor of psychology with over 25 years of experience in clinical practice and education. His research focuses on the increasing awareness around mental health issues among young people, particularly the rise of loneliness and the significance of meaning and purpose in achieving happiness and fulfillment. Henry employs a therapeutic approach that integrates client-centered therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and psychodynamic principles, providing a holistic framework for his work with clients. We're happy to have Henry with us today to explore his research on the rising loneliness and hopelessness among our young people and our young adults, and to delve into the trends of what he refers to as the giving up generation. Henry, welcome to our show.
Thank you.
So nice to have you here, man. You know, we're going to get into your work with young people, your research, and your recommendations for growth in our show today. But I have to share with you that, as I was preparing for our show, I found myself sitting with your phrase, the giving up generation. And there was a sadness and a heaviness that I was experiencing around what is happening in the lives of our young generation coming up into this world. Share with us what brought you into this work with young people and this particular focus that you have.
A lot of us in mental health started to notice that we have a tremendous rise in the mental health reporting to ERs, treatment for mental health, diagnosing, more than we would expect. If you think there are around about 380,000 health apps available through Apple and Android systems, 20,000 is just dedicated to mental health. There's mental health available everywhere. Services is at an all-time high. Mm-hmm. So we would expect that mental health would actually, the levels of mental health would decrease. But since about 2010, 2015, for long before COVID, we noticed that all over the world, mental health issues among young people, adolescents, as well as young adults. We consider young adults 18 to 25, from a lot of them are called Gen Z, and that's rising. And then that's where researchers started noticing that a lot of the mental health issues that's reported is a lot of depression and loneliness. And then it showed that this is happening all over the world. This is not the United States. It's literally all over the world. Asia, different cultures. That was what started standing out. Different cultures started showing the same problems, like South Korea. So one of the hotspots of loneliness and youth mental health problems. So before COVID, we saw that is this change, and it reverberated through to our students. We started seeing less engagement with our students, especially our younger students. I mean, we now have conferences, education conferences, just focused on engagement. How do we get people engaged? And so then COVID happened, and that was just a catalyst to blow this whole thing up. But it was actually there before.
Yeah.
And so during COVID, it became actually worse. So a lot of people then said, well, COVID caused this. And that's where they got my interest to say, no, we need to educate people that this was not COVID. Because if COVID caused it, then COVID is over, then the problem is over. And it's very important to, in this whole discussion, if we say in the end, what do we do about it? To notice it was not COVID. This started way before COVID. And that research showed us. And so for instance, there was an APA 2020 survey that found that 61% of young people said that they felt lonely, up from 54% in 2028. That was followed up by several studies by Cigna, one of the major health insurance companies, also around 2020, that showed the same thing in tremendous. This is all before COVID, and then COVID exacerbated that. And so that got me into this study that we need to look at what causes this, especially since as an educator at university, it's very important to me to see what's happening with students. Because at the same time, we saw a decline in enrollments from before, and also a decline in trust in higher education. And so these things started to be connected. This loneliness, and we looked at what is happening with people when they feel lonely. Well, suddenly we saw that they also feel less meaningful, they had less purpose. And we thought, well, is it just about education? And then we discovered, no, it's not just about education. They also feel like this about life, about giving up on work. And they call it, the soft resignation, all these kind of things. So we have a much larger problem than just students that lost trust in higher education or feel a little bit, this is not the path. It is a much bigger problem. So that caught my interest, and I started focusing on that and started to study more up, and I presented all over. In fact, when I presented at a conference in Canada and on the Friday, and without knowing that, the Surgeon General in America the day before published a white paper on loneliness among young people. So that's when I knew, all right, this is a big deal. We need to focus on this.
Yes, it is. Wow, that's so nicely laid out. There are 20,000 mental health apps. And we would say these are external aids that we have access to. And despite having all access to these things, there's still an issue.
We are more connected. We thought we are more connected via the internet than ever before. Who can be lonely? Everybody's connected, even areas that wasn't connected before. So we have this rise in the connectivity of the internet. We thought, then people are going to be able to connect. They're not going to be lonely. And yet, this is one of the anomalies. In spite of more connectivity and availability to mental health services online, mental health issues rose, loneliness rose, and that became really disconcerting.
Yeah, and what you're saying there, we're more connected than ever. That's a misnomer. We're not more connected. We have more connectivity.
Yes.
And what you're doing right here is teasing apart some words that are really connected. We're not more connected.
That's right.
And or maybe if we were to say, well, we're more connected, we have the ability to connect with each other in greater ways because of the connectivity. But what you're talking about, I think, is the quality of the connection being so very different. Speak to that.
I like that when you say we are connected, but there is not enough connection.
Yeah.
So what do we see? This online world started to change young people in spectators. So then I was looking at what is happening online. And in spite of you've heard about the actor of FOMO, fear of missing out. I thought, well, if they don't want to miss out, they're probably very involved. But if you go online, you see people have these millions of followers, they called it. Well, that's exactly what they're doing. Being a follower doesn't mean any connection.
Yes.
They're not connected. And then often the interaction that then arises among these followers are often very contentious, leading to bullying and all of that. And so we realized that this is not the type of connection that's going to help us with improving mental health. Now, it's a very well-known fact that there's always been, when treating depression, issues like that, one of the biggest issues was always to prevent isolation. We always knew isolation is the first thing the depression wants to do. Your subconscious wants to draw you into a corner, go lie down, hide out. It's a very primal subconscious protection. But we also know people get worse the more they isolate.
Yes.
And so part of when you treated people with depression, you always started working at a plan to get them organized and eventually create connection.
Yes.
And so now we realize that people thought they were connected online, but they're actually not. They are just spectators that watch other people doing what they are doing.
Yeah.
And then you also know what they're watching is often not real. It's very carefully collated. To give you an example, I was at a mall here in Atlanta a while ago. And you know what is one of the new stores in the mall? It's actually a place where you can come in and video yourself in a small studio as if it's real. And they say they do it for the likes. So you can come in as a young person. There's a little studio that's all made up, like it's all fancy. You can go and you video it as if it's your place. It's actually in the mall. It's not even real. Young people are actually renting Airbnbs and then videotaping themselves and putting that online. So you imagine you a young person, you're watching that, you think that person's life is real, and it's not even real. And so they're following stuff that's very carefully collated. I mean, one of the things that I read during this festivities of the Irish holiday, St. Patrick's, is one of the famous people online wanted also to show that the person was going to go to a bar and just have beer like normal people. But the bar was actually emptied out. There was 20 people in the production that videotaped that interaction. But if you played it online, it looked like the person walked into the bar like a normal person and having a beer. It's all false. I have nothing against that. It's a business. The problem is young people are following that and think, oh, I'm missing out.
Yeah.
But actually they're missing out on nothing. It's not even real. And so that is part of it caused the poor connection. It's also the disillusionment that how can I ever be somebody like that?
Yeah.
And so this gave rise, and this also caught my attention. A lot of young people, we started asking, what do you want to do in the future? They said things like, I want to be famous. Famous for what? I don't know. I want to be a star. Well, a star of what? Now, really, years ago, you said, I want to become an actor. That means, okay, I got to go to acting school. I got to learn acting and I go through the process. I go to Juilliard, all that. Now it's I just want to be a star. I don't care how to be a star. So it became a very undefined rule that very easily leads to disillusionment, because what's the path to become a star? What's the path to become famous? Once you lose that path, it's going to lead to this disillusionment that I don't even know what the path is. And then it can very easily lead to giving up. There is no path.
Well, let's stay with this for a second, because you're talking about, it's said over and over and over again that these things we see online, that, there's some real stories going on. I follow some friends on social media and I see what they're doing, and it's real. I know it because I know them.
Yes.
But there's a lot of it, like you're saying, where there's smoke and mirrors. There's even studios now that people can go into, and people kind of know that anyway, but they kind of get off on it. They follow it. They vicariously have a connection or participate with us. But we know for the most part that most of these things have some element of, glitz and dazzle, and that really aren't real. So there's a part of us that knows that we're being played. There's a part of us that still plays into it. But you referenced something important. Mm-hmm. This was percolating before COVID. It wasn't COVID.
Yes.
COVID, in so many ways, just turned the heat up on some issues brewing in our society for a while, and it just exposed them. It turned things into kind of boiling water moments, and things got exposed. So what you're referencing now is that these qualities were happening prior to COVID. They likely weren't happening 20, 25 years ago. There was something different about that time versus in this most recent generation. So let me ask you this. You referenced the significance of developing meaning and purpose in one life. There's nothing more important than that in order to achieve, happiness and fulfillment based, as best we can on the things that we participate in. So meaning and purpose being critical. What types of relationships, you're a psychologist, as am I, what types of relationships are meaning and purpose best developed within?
I think you just referenced that earlier. You follow some people that's real, that the stuff they put up is happening. Authentic connections. You make friends with people that's authentic, then you grow with them. I also follow people that's authentic. That's them. That's who they are. They live what they video, and therefore they are empowering to listen to them because they are authentic in what they live, what they preach, we can say. Sure. It's their experience. And there is a lack of authentic connections. Young people need to be connected to other people that's authentic, that they can trust, that can inspire them. Mm-hmm. And there's really a lack in that because they're looking for role models and it's not there. And
so
the value of role models and how that can affect you.
Perfect. So let's start right there. So go back to what you said, because I think it's critical. Where do our earliest role models come from?
It comes from where we are born, where we grow up. First 7 years of your life is the vital area where you can't think that much because your brain is not developed. You can just feel. And so you make that emotional connections with the adults around you. That's why the adults are. Now remember, 25 years ago and longer, the young people were surrounded that's how I grew up, not just surrounded by mom and dad. I was surrounded by 2 sets of grandparents,
yes,
a myriad of uncles and aunts, which I just didn't know who they are, but that's your uncle, that's your, right. and you had to listen to them.
Absolutely.
They're your parents. If they discipline you. So we had the more extensive family. Remember, urbanization then started to take the family away from where they grew up, because they went to cities, or we had to go away for jobs. And so you started with this whole suburbia, which there's a little home for one family. Now that worked okay, but remember what then also happened the last 25 years is the tremendous rise in the divorce rate. So families now started to break up. The children are now not supported by an extended family. And then the family started breaking. The divorce rate is now pushing way above 50%. So a lot of breakups. So now you can look at, client of the client that I work with, tell me the first 7 years of your life. We get by year 3, it's a calamity. It's a breakup. It's there. And that's where it becomes problematic, because that early connection wasn't there. So now that always leaves a person with that need to find that. Now, often they go to school, and you know the value of that. You connect with a good teacher or coach, you change for life. But it doesn't always happen.
Yeah, but I like what you're saying here. In the absence of these things happening within the family, within the first 3, 5, 6, 7 years, if we don't have the substantive connections there, we're left being like a bucket with a hole in it, where we're going around in life looking to have this bucket filled. And media says, we'll fill it for you. Yeah. Stars say, we'll fill it for you. Activities say, we'll fill it for you. But come connect with us, come follow us, and we'll fill it for you. But it's empty. It's the antithesis of true connection. And there's nothing possible to fulfill us within the context of that. And I think what happens then, you're saying, if we can't get meaning and purpose in our families, and we can't achieve the happiness and fulfillment that can come out of those relationships with a myriad of aunts and uncles and grandparents and family around and everybody stepping on each other's toes, but there's connectedness and knowing of oneself in that, then we can't achieve a true happiness and a fulfillment in our lives, because we're empty, and we're looking for something to fill us in the wrong ways.
Very important. And what happened, so what we're saying is, we created over the last 25 years, these young people that now came through and said, I'm not full, I need to be full.
Yes.
Now, previously, what did fulfill us? The American dream. You go to school, you go to college, you get a job, you marry, you get a house, and you're on your path to success. You can work yourself way up. Then the whole world changed. The economy changed, and it became harder and harder in capitalist societies to function. Now, there isn't a place in the world that's not capitalist. I was in Moscow, in Russia, in China. They all capitalist. They live the same life as the American people. There isn't that thing. Everybody has to earn and go up. But suddenly it became much more difficult to do that. College students ended up with an astronomical number to pay back, and started realizing we will never be able. Talk to a lot of students today that graduated, and you will hear more and more telling you that I'll never be able to pay this debt back. I don't know how many times I hear that. I owe so much that I talk to students that owe between $250,000 to $750,000. Yeah. They say, I will never get a job enough to pay that back.
But you know what I think about that, though, Henry? What I think about that is, how in the world did that happen? Where were your gatekeepers along the way to say, dude, what are you doing? Honey, what are you doing? This is not realistic.
They were buying into the dream. This was the path. Culturally, that was the path. I was there as well. When my oldest son finished high school, the only thing in my mind was he's got to go to college.
Yeah.
There were lengths that I went, the money that I spent to get him into college, that was stuck, because I was driven by that cultural plan, the map that was instilled in me, that success goes to send my child to college. And then, that'll be the path to success. So a lot of parents, just really culturally, you're driven by a map, by an internal map, a script that comes from time. It's not easy to change that. Right. The problem is that higher education developed a model where, how do we balance the books every year? Well, we just raise the tuition. The problem, and now they're at the point where all universities know you can't raise tuition anymore. It's not going to happen. But so this young generation we have now arrived at a point where they want to be fulfilled, but the American dream can't fulfill them anymore, because they say you can't even buy a home, starter homes. In fact, starter homes are disappearing. It's interesting that it was a concept that was very, very relevant 20 years ago. Today, it's not even relevant anymore because there isn't something like starters. Builders are not building starters. They're building to sell or they build to rent. So the young people now know, they'll say, I can never pay my debt back. I will never be able to own a home and I can never get a job paying me enough. And that triggered this giving up generation that says, why do we even try? We can just as well see how little we can do because what worked for you guys 25 or 50 years ago doesn't work for us anymore. We don't believe that anymore.
We'll be right back after word from our sponsor.
Continuing education is both a requirement and a learning opportunity, but finding the right CE provider can be challenging. AATBS, a Triad company, offers continuing education for psychologists, social workers, marriage and family therapists, counselors, and behavior analysts. CE courses are available both individually and as part of our new All Access Pass. All Access Pass provides a library of over 250 unique courses. That's more than 800 hours of CEs, with new courses being added every month. As a special offer, Behavioral Health Today listeners can save 15% on CE purchases. Visit us at aatbs.com/BHT and enter promo code BHT15 during checkout. That's aatbs.com/BHT. Check out our library and check off your CE requirements today.
Just out of curiosity, I want to jump into the giving up generation. I both really love that term and I'm saddened by that term, but it captures something very important. But let me hold something up that you're saying at its core. We've either done this to ourselves or we've allowed this to happen to ourselves. Somehow we were allowing ourselves to get caught up into something that either we didn't know was occurring or going to have these kinds of consequences, or we got pulled into something that had a promise around it that proved to be not true. And here we are suffering the consequences of it. We're going to be increasing our dependence upon probably the government because we're going to look to, them to kind of help bail us out of these things or help us through these things. So we're going to a place of dependence in some ways. What is your thought, Henry, around why did we let this happen to us?
It just creeped up on us. The map that we had, the script that we had, that what leads to success just fell apart, right in front of us. And the economies is so fixed on going one direction. Governments are fixed on one generation. They are just too slow to change and didn't realize that we will have to find another way to give meaning, to give purpose, to give hope to our young people. For instance, we now have under people that's around 65, the most retirement millionaires ever, meaning people who have $1 million in their retirement accounts ever. Yes. That comes from work over the last 50 years and prior. The young people are now being told, you will never get to that. You will never get to that. And so, it's giving up. But it's interesting, you asked me earlier, and I think it's important to point that out, where did the term really started? It really started in Korea. So interesting, not just in our culture, where there was driven by Confucianism, it's like accept your fate and, go forward. But they developed a term there among young people that started giving up on a lot of their values in their culture, and they call it the Sampo generation. Sampo literally means giving up on three. And so the three things they started giving up initially, the three things was dating, marriage, and childbirth. They said, we're just not going to do that anymore. That's going to be punishment. Now, currently, that is, as if that wasn't, bad enough, it is now changed into being called the 7 giving up generation. So they're now giving up on love, marriage, childbirth, human relationships, home ownership, and personal dreams and hope.
Why even live? What are you living for?
Exactly.
You don't have any of these things. What are you living for?
And so what has happened is the suicide rate among our younger generation, the world over, has risen unbelievably. So it's really important to know that this is not isolated to one culture. It is isolated because they developed, if you look at Korea, they developed a script very based upon capitalism. I'm not knocking capitalism. We just need to know that in capitalism, we often create a scripted path for people to say, this is what you need to invest, do this can lead to success. and it stopped working for our young people because they now look at the cost and say, I will never be able to work and have children because it's too expensive. It's too expensive. I can't have, like, I have 3 children. A lot of young people will say, I don't even know I'm going to have 1 child because we have now calculated. Now, remember, when I had children, started having children, I never, ever sat down and considered even the cost of childcare. It absolutely never came up in my mind. Well, I wonder how much we can pay in 7 years when this child go to school. Not going to come up. You talk to young people today, they have already calculated the cost of childcare. They say, and they've now calculated, said, if I pay childcare, if I have to send this child to college and all that, I won't have the job that I have. So maybe our young people became too smart. We made them too smart that they started thinking, said this stuff, and they are questioning what we're doing. So we basically lost our young people, they included. It was very interesting in me in this current climate of, we are in an election climate, how the quest started for getting the young vote. We need to get the young people in. And I was like, well, let's see how you guys are going to do that on both sides of the aisle. And all they did was, let's get famous young people to say who they vote for, and then young people will follow it. Have you noticed that not on one side of the aisle did any political party bring up the issue of young people, the quest of young people? Nobody. Yeah. It's not even a talking point in the debate. Yeah. Nothing. This thing is ignored completely. But they are clamoring after young votes. Why are they losing the young votes? Because they are not even believing. The last time young people were very excited was since the election with President Obama. Got very excited. Talk to them what happened after that. And they'll tell you, we were disappointed because we were promised a lot and we were delivered very little. So they started getting up on the political stuff. But it was sad to me when I saw the plan they had to get the young vote is just to get another person to say, follow that person, instead of saying, we know you guys have problems, and here is my plan for the young generation. This is what I am going to do. Not one of them are talking about that. So that our government, our political parties don't even have a clue what they did, but they want the vote. If you're going to earn somebody's vote, and they are not earning the vote, and so young people are now saying, I talk to a lot of young people that say, you know what, I'm not even going to vote because there's nobody that's really there to fight for us. Now, I got to say, President Biden was the only one that said, I'm going to try to get some of this study debt forgiven. And how far did he go with that? How far did they take him? He touched the holy cow there, and that's not going to go anywhere because now it's interesting. Just take for a moment. Can you imagine, you're an ideological person, and say, let's develop a system where we lend these young people money. But you know what? We're not going to ask them the prime real estate, the prime interest rate. We're going to give them a higher rate. Do you know that while the prime interest number is 6%, that you pay 11% back on your study? What is the message we send to young people? Yeah. We are using you. It doesn't even make sense. Like the other day, I bought a car. So I went in, I negotiated. I said, guys, this is the prime interest rate. The guy started at 11%. I said, I think I'm going to go to the next dealership here. I'm going to leave. This doesn't work out. And I got them down to the lowest low. You go for your study debt. You are hit at 11 or 12%. It is. So what's the message you send to young people? We don't really care. They go to court. The court says, well, that's unconstitutional. You can't forgive study debt. So we are sending a message to young people that's already drowning. It's like, you know what, we think throwing out a lifeline to you is really too expensive. Let's see if you can swim out. The society is sending the wrong message to young people.
Yeah, and I think there's so many pieces here we could jump on. We'll probably have to have you back here, Henry, at some point to continue to delve in deeper. But this idea that young people are being sought after, but it's a user's way. We really want your vote, but we're not going to necessarily help you. In fact, the reason the student debt is so high right now is because government took over the student loans, and you cannot default on a student loan. The government was smart. They basically handcuffed our students to pay back the loans, and they keep getting them, and they made them easier. That's why school tuitions kept going up, because they knew that government loans were going to cover the tuition. Students had to pay them back. The government didn't care. The schools didn't care. And now our young people are strapped with this burden that they didn't even know that they were getting into. It was a sad thing. What you're raising here too, though, it leads to this concept not even a concept, but a stance where young people are feeling so burdened by these things that I'm going to hold up this. We could say, well, the young people of today, baloney, the parents of today, not our government, the parents of
Yes.
today, they're sheep and they're wolves and they're sheepdogs. We as parents are the sheepdogs, and we've
Yes.
lost our way in protecting our children. And
Yes.
the true purpose, meaning in life, hope, that comes from the family. That comes from
That's
parents
right.
being able to say, regardless of your circumstances, here's how you cowboy up, here's how you cowgirl up, and we're going to help you get through these times.
That's
And we're going to
right.
help you make right decisions so you can experience the happiness and the fulfillment that you have the potential to have in your life. And if we don't help you do this, you're going to be at the mercy of those puppeteers out there, a handful of them, that want to organize your life for you, promising all these great things, but they're going to leave you an empty shell of loneliness to the point where you're going to feel so hopeless that you're going to want to give up.
That's
Talk
right.
about this giving up generation. They are really struggling.
They're struggling. If you take the statistics that the ABA did a study in 2003, Stress in America, I think called Stress in America, they found that astounding rates, like the 18s to 34s, were at a rate of 67% of them were incredibly stressed and stressed about finances, stressed about the future. But at a rate that was just unbelievable. Their stress is tremendously high. So what do people do when they are stressed? Often the only thing that you do is you start giving up because it feels like a plan. It feels like a way out. But of course, that is solving a problem with the problem. So we need to instill a new way of working, instill hope. And we need to re-educate parents to stop looking at these previous paths of what is going to take your child forward. We need to re-educate them that there is various paths for their children to grow forward, and not just the old one of do this, and that will lead you to that. To look more creatively at different paths for
I
the
really
children.
like that. Yeah, I like that, Henry. I don't think we can rely upon our government for these kinds of things. It's basically there's competing values. There's a group of folks that want to, and I love what you said earlier. We're getting the youth vote. We got to go with the youth vote, but no one's talking about what the youth need. Well, part of the plan is, hey, we're going to pay back some of your student loans. The truck driver going down the street right here who had to go to a trade school is barely making it for his family, has to pay off that student loan. My 90-year-old mom has to pay money out of her income to pay off that student loan. Wrong. What you're saying here is we can't look to the government to basically bail us out of it. What you're raising is we have got to get the adults back into the game and saying, hey, here are the situations that are in our lives right now. Let's find creative ways through this, because there are a handful, again, of people who are basically have competing values with what our youth needs and what they want to exploit. It's almost like the drug dealer saying, hey, I'm really interested in your sobriety. Really? You're not interested in my sobriety. You're interested in giving me more drugs. You don't care about my sobriety. Hey, look at this app. We have 40 psychologists. We have 40 psychologists, behavioral psychologists behind each and every program that knows the exact right time to hit a bell, hit a whistle, a nice light that keeps us entrenched in these programs that we get ourselves logged on to, non-mental health ones, but ones that keep us hooked. We have studios now. We can go into at the mall and create a facade of something. So we have all this elaborate Hollywood stuff that draws young people who are naive, who are ignorant, who are vulnerable. And we need to, I think you're right. I think we need to bring these adults back in with a vengeance, a healthy vengeance, coming in and saying, hey, we're going to rescue you as sheepdogs that you don't even know what you don't know about what you're in, because there are some wolves that are trying to get you and exploit you. And they will use you and drop you, and you will be a shell of nothing, and you'll be unhappy. And if you're going to be giving up generation, like you said with the Korean, went from 3 to 7, why live? They'll use you up. They'll say, hey, do you want to live? Understandable. There's going to be many more like you behind you.
It's really important that there needs to be a new message to parents, what they are supposed to do. Remember, the old model said it's just prepare your child to go to school.
Yes.
Because then from there on, there will be a path to success. That's not true anymore. What needs to happen? Parents need to begin to realize the most important thing that they need to instill in the children is emotional resilience. Mental strength. That's the one thing that the young people that we have now over the last 25 years didn't get that.
Yes.
Because the parents failed. It's not their fault. The parents failed it. The caregivers, they failed it. they did not instill a mental strength in them.
Yes.
Their ego strength. The old word we used was ego strength.
Yes.
And today they call it mental resiliency.
Yes.
And we need to educate parents say, well, because a lot of parents will say, what is that? Why do I do that? And, interesting enough, one of the easiest ways to do that is to enroll your child from a very young age in organized program of sports, for instance,
Yes.
where they are going to be they're going to be taught to lose. They're going to be taught rules.
Yes.
But if you look at in the last 25, how many, we can go do back and do the math of all of that. How many of these young people has been in sports, and I'm guilty of the same thing, didn't do enough for my children to get them in that.
We took physical education out of our programs at school.
That's right. And it became so difficult getting children into varsity sports. Only a select few can be there. We kind of made it a little bit semi-professional. And yet the idea is to get as many of these children to engage in activities like that where they can learn mental strength. Yeah. But a lot of what's happening in school is not designed to develop mental resiliency among our children. And you need mental resiliency to survive in this life that we are in. It is a tough life. It's not an easy life, and it's the world over.
Scott Peck, in the first sentence of his book, The Road Less Traveled, he said, life is difficult, period.
Yeah, that's right.
So basically bring a hard hat, put on some Kevlar, and let's do this. But to do life in that successful way, what you're saying is, and this is well, Henry, what do we do now? And we're going to need to wind down the show for today, and we're going to bring you back because I want to mine down a little bit deeper into what do we do now? What you're saying so clearly, and I couldn't agree with you more. And I love your message, man. It's this idea that we need to bring the adults back into our young people's lives with right solutions for the situations that we are currently in our lives at this point. Yes, it's a building of resilience. It's a building of a mental strength and ego that you're right, we referred to once upon a time, not egotism or arrogance. It's a strong sense of who we are. If we don't have that strong sense of who we are a bucket going around the world to try and fill ourselves up, but we can't fill it up because there's a hole in the bottom. So what we can do now is we can come back and we can maybe take where people are at right now and help them claim a true sense of themselves with the things that you're highlighting, to then come back into the world and say, okay, now how do I go get this fulfillment? How do I go after the things? Because I know who I am. Because if I don't get that sense of knowing, the world's going to try and tell you, well, you're going to know yourself through this, or try this, or try this. And it's empty. There's no return on that investment.
No,
but Henry, as we wind down here, man, what a fun conversation. I'm enjoying this with you.
Once you start mining down at it, you start seeing this is not just localized, but this is worldwide where this is happening.
Yes.
And if you look at government after government, country after country is not making this a priority.
Yes.
And you're thinking, well, if these group of people in the next 10 years, going to be the next generation of this, and we're just going to move forward. And if we keep creating people like that, we are literally self-destruct.
Yes,
that's
exactly
our
right.
core. This is our future. These young people are our future. And we're not even talking about that.
When we come back at another show, we're going to bring you back, and we're going to talk about how do we not self-destruct as parents, as young people. How do we sheepdog this against those that are trying to take advantage and use up our young people in ways that is selfish, agenda-driven, and just not okay? Between now and that show, Henry, I would love folks to be able to learn more about you, what you're doing, and give us some ways for them to find you after our show today.
In all of this, I decided to start a YouTube channel called Restart because I deal with so many people that try to make it in this society and then fail, and then they give up. And so I've just started a channel. They can find me there, and my email is also there. And so in the process, giving them some tips on part of actually life is to fail. It's not the end of the world. It is actually just a tool. It's a teacher. Failure is like you're out, and then they give up so soon. But because of the lack of mental strength, often people just feel I can't do it again. And since I worked with a lot of people that we started, I thought, we need to teach these principles on a larger scale. So I saw, a lot of people are doing it effectively on platform. Well, let's do it. So that's where they'll start finding me on that channel Restart, and we'll build it out. I get 2 other people working with me, and we got to put up material there, just practical.
I love that. I think we're either winning or we're learning. We're not failing. We're learning. We get to we get to reset. We get to come in and do things differently. Well, Henry, we're going to put your resources up in our show description today for our listeners to follow up and learn more about you and what you're doing. We know that you have a YouTube channel as well, Restart. But in the meantime, it's been great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
That is great. Great meeting you guys.
We really appreciate what you're doing. Thank you so much for being on the show today, and we're going to be looking forward to having you back. Thanks again. I also want to thank you, our listeners, for dropping by and joining Henry and me today. It's always great to have you with us. Regarding our episode today, I want to remind you that it and its resources and all of our other episodes can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. Thanks again for being with us on the show. And we'll look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.